Another edition of Riding Home. This time, Legge and Dylan Webber. You can hear the riding in the background. We talk about Georgia a lot every single day. Typically, when Dylan comes riding home from practice, or I come riding home from practice or games. If you're not subscribed on YouTube, you should do so right afterwards. Tell us what you think. Comments on iTunes as well as YouTube. Thanks for everybody for listening. Georgia and the Gators this week. Dylan, Georgia is sitting right around a 6.5, 7 point favorite for this game. The Dogs have, Kirby Smart and the Dogs have closed practice the entire week, which is not a new thing for big games, but it is something that kind of makes life more difficult at times.
Yeah, because, now Kirby has talked about these injuries, but usually it's just a way to check it, these practices. But, once again, I said this on Monday, I think, it just shows how serious they are about this game. They closed all practices for the SEC championships, I believe. But I don't know if they've ever done it for a regular season game.
In the past, in 2012, I'm pretty sure, the week of the Florida game, it's not abnormal for Georgia to close practices, generally speaking. I have to say, I don't know really what they get out of it. I mean, you're talking about secrecy of 10 to 15 minutes each time.
That's generous. That's generous.
Right.
I would even go to say like 4 to 6.
And I'm not sure if the Gators closed practice this week or not. But look, it's their practice. It's on their facility. I get it. As far as all that's concerned, but again, I don't know how much it really matters at the end of the day. If you're not going to execute, then that's going to be your biggest problem. But to some degree, it sets the tone, I guess, if you want to say. But it does look like they're going to get Lawrence Cager back. It does look like they're going to get Tyson Campbell back. You can correct me if I'm wrong on those. It looks like Georgia might be missing one player in this entire thing.
Yeah, I think the biggest one's Cager for sure. I don't think he's going to be 100%. It sounded like Monday he was in a non-contact jersey. So, still participating, which is a big up from, the past couple of weeks, but still not, all the way there. But yeah, they really need him. Just a veteran wide receiver there who's played in games like this.
Yes, it's an important game, needless to say, for both programs. Quite frankly, this has been the bellwether decision game in the East for a while now. Actually, it's not been the entire time the conference has been in divisions, but it's been the bulk of the time for sure. But certainly from about 1997, 1998 on, this game has taken on very significant importance in the division. The Gators and Dogs haven't split the divisions in that time, but it's been close actually. Florida had ripped off 5 straight conference championships. 92, 93, 94, 95, 96. They had ripped off 4 in a row, 3, 4, 5, 6. They thought in 7 that they could get back there. They started the season with a win over Tennessee, and then obviously getting beat by LSU, which was something I don't think they saw coming. But that was a run for the Gators that was one of the most impressive runs in conference history. You don't go. There's not been that many conference championships in a row for any program, Alabama or whoever. But they started in 1993 by taking out Alabama in the championship game there, and then the season later in '94 winning by a point. In '95 they took out Arkansas, if I'm not mistaken, in Atlanta. That game was not close. And then in 1996, after losing to Florida State, the Gators went on to take out Alabama again by 15 points. But from 97 on, that's why this Georgia Gator game in 97 was really so important. That wasn't the end of Florida winning the conference, but it was coming close to the end of it. From that stage forward until even today, the amount of conference championships in a row, I don't think they've ever won back-to-back SEC championships since. And that was after winning it that many years in a row. So that was an important game Dylan, at that time. I know that's before your time, but
Wait, I mean, yeah, not even before my time, before my life.
well, there you go. Obviously, that Tennessee represented the East in 98, 99. Alabama beat Florida really badly in the championship game in 99. And Spurrier's last SEC championship was in 2000. And from that point forward, the Gators have, Georgia's been the steadier program. They haven't had the highs of the two national championships. They haven't had the lows of just what have been some rough times this decade at Florida. But they have been the steadier program. They've only had two head coaches since 2001. Florida's had, I think, four this decade or five. Urban, Muschamp, McElwain, and now Mullen. So four in this decade. So that's not that's not a lot of stability. But looking, I'm sorry to ramble on about the Gators, but it was such a huge game in a different way than it is now. People your age don't remember the struggles against Florida. I mean, you've witnessed them beating Georgia once, correct?
In my time here, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, that's a very different perspective than someone
I remember the days of Tebow and all that. I don't remember thinking much of it just because I didn't. I don't know. Was not as ingrained in Georgia football as I am now. Right. But I mean, I do remember just the dominance of Florida in that time.
That was probably one of the best. Now they won two national championships, and that was Tebow was on the 06 team, but he wasn't the reason why they won the national championship.
Yeah.
But that 08 and 09 Florida team, those were really good Florida teams, probably their best teams in history. Even though two other teams won national championships, other than those, that 08 and 09 team, that's really when everything. I mean, Florida really has not been the same since 2009. That's for sure. And when they lost to Alabama in the SEC championship game, Tim Tebow, of course, speaking of Tim Tebow, crying on the sideline. He had a hard time dealing with emotions when Florida lost. It's understandable. College kids put in a lot of work, sacrifice, etc. So I get it. But Florida has not been the same since. And really, Kyle Trask has been their steadiest quarterback in that time. I mean, Will Grier getting thrown out for PEDs or whatever it was. They haven't had a steady quarterback this entire decade, and that's why they've struggled so much.
Yeah, and you have to wonder just what Will Grier at Florida would have been like.
Oh,
I mean, because he was solid that freshman year and was really good at West Virginia. I mean, he could have made that Florida team legit.
Well, they were. That was a very good Florida team. You know, looking like it was going to be a very, very good Florida team, but that really disrupted Florida at that time. And all during this time, Georgia was winning the league, but they were figuring out how along the way to not win the national championship. I mean, it was from 1992 on, and it's hard to tell for sure when everything changed with Georgia and the Gators. I would say, to me, and looking back on it, it might not have felt like it the next 2 years, but in 2007, when they stormed the field and won that game, 42-30, that was kind of Georgia's, moment of saying, we're not taking this anymore. We've had enough of this. We're not going to get bullied anymore. And I think since then they've won more than half of the games, and that was after going like 3 of 21 or something crazy. They had gotten dominated, and it really changed then. And of course, Florida won the national championship the next season. But Georgia has really, at a minimum, held their own. The importance of winning this week is twofold, wouldn't you say, or multifold? Why does it matter in your mind if Georgia were to win this week?
well, first of all, I mean, not necessarily guarantee them the SEC championship, or like a spot in the SEC championship, but I mean, if they lose this game, they're not going to go.
Right.
That's a matter of fact. Very likely, I should say. But I mean, so that's part of it. But then also, I mean, it gives Florida momentum,
Yes.
just in general.
I agree.
And so, just in the future. I mean, because that gets them in the SEC championship game. That helps them in recruiting. It makes them seem more legitimate under Dan Mullen, and it'll up the recruiting game between the two of them. So I mean, that's another facet of it.
That's really the one thing that separates these two programs right now is Dan Mullen has not recruited the way Kirby Smart has, and if he comes in and wins in the second season, that would be a big deal. Listen, if Mark Richt had won in the year 2000 against the Gators, first of all, you're talking about an undefeated Georgia team playing, winning the SEC championship. I don't know if they would have played for the national championship or not, but in terms of the Georgia-Florida dynamic, that slowed Georgia's progression in the rivalry because they went down there as the number 3 team in the country and lost to a Florida team that was, not that great. That's why when you look at this game right now, they're number 5 team in the country. Florida was not ranked. Florida was not good that year. I mean, that was an 8-5 Florida team. That was Georgia's only loss that year. So if you look at the situation right now with this game, that's why I think it's so critical. It gives Florida and Dan Mullen just no momentum, and you never know what will happen in an off season. Florida proved that this past year.
Yeah, I don't know, because it seems like they are getting momentum already under Dan Mullen. I mean, more than even with 2 SEC championship appearances than they did under Jim McElwain.
Right. Well, looking back on it, Jim McElwain was not as that was not as impressive. But look, dude, too though, I mean, if you're Dan Mullen and you're at Florida, you got to get to Atlanta. I mean, like, that Georgia is going and you are not is not going to be acceptable for very long down there. He's certainly made them better, but this was when they hit a rough patch in their season last year, the Gators, and if it happens again, people are just going to say, well, is this a pattern now all of a sudden? And that'd be a good question, actually.
Yeah, I mean, 2 times, it's, I think the third time is going to be the real teller for Dan Mullen, at least. I mean, unless they get a win, that would be just huge for him there. I mean, and that would, I don't know, when you get a win over a rivalry, that buys you a lot of space and room just with fans.
I'm trying to think the last time that in this rivalry that, and this truly is a rivalry. This isn't like, Georgia, South Carolina, or Tennessee. I mean, Tennessee is a different situation, but I'm trying to think in this rivalry, the last time, well, it had been 2014. I mean, the last time that the Gators were not the better team and they won, because you'd have to go back a ways now all of a sudden. I mean, it was 2005. They definitely tripped up a Georgia team that did not have their starting quarterback and most important player, so that was important. Mark Richt's issue in that time was he went in there 3 times with a top 5 Georgia team and lost to a team at Florida that was not in the top 10. That was a killer for him, and he never, with the exception of the 2012 game, that might have been one of Mark Richt's finest moments. Really, he in 2014 when Todd Gurley got suspended and they won at Missouri and then Arkansas, that was masterful coaching, quite frankly. But the 2012 Georgia Florida, I mean, man, it was all on the line for both teams. And that was a huge, huge win for Georgia, 17-9 over the Gators. It was a defensive fight, man. Like that was a game of body blows right there. This game is so important to both sides. It's hard to really stress. I mean, you don't, as important as Georgia Auburn is, it just doesn't feel the same as this one. And on the field, it's a very strange dynamic out there because of the neutral site and all the things that go into it, all of this stuff. But it's such a big part of what Georgia is, this game. Not unlike Texas and Oklahoma.
Yeah, I think it's very similar, except only just the proximity to the two colleges. But otherwise, Georgia, Florida, Texas, Oklahoma is very similar. And I think the feeling is probably similar, too. Just because that 50-50 split, because you really don't see that in many games. You talk about bowl games maybe, and even then it can be split. SEC championship maybe.
Yeah.
But otherwise, most football games you play in, have a very one-sided fan base in the stadium.
This is just, Georgia's not going to play that many more games this season. Really just one against Auburn, where they will be in the minority. And for the most part, in this Kirby time, they've taken advantage of the imagination that has been, wrestled up by Kirby's, climbing the ladder with this program. These fans have traveled all the time. And if you think about it, Dylan, it can't be that shocking that Georgia fans travel when 42,000 of them travel to Jacksonville every single year. That's not close to Athens or Atlanta.
No, Auburn is closer. Texas closer. Way closer.
Jacksonville is as close to Athens as Lexington, Kentucky is.
That's a really good way to put it.
Think about that. Going to Knoxville is closer than Jacksonville. Going to Tuscaloosa, going to almost all of the SEC schools, certainly the bulk of the East where Georgia plays, South Carolina, Tennessee, not Missouri. But those schools are closer. Auburn, Alabama, certainly Georgia Tech, which is not a conference foe. But every single year, Georgia fans make this pilgrimage to Jacksonville. Not the greatest town on earth, but a place that Southeast Georgia has really benefited from this game for years. What did you make of them extending the contract by essentially 2 years? What was your sort of view of the world on that?
I liked it. I like that it's in Jacksonville, just because I think it's special that it is. Although it is kind of a mutual field game, it still technically is, and I think that's cool. Especially in college football, because there's just so few of them. I think three that I can think of.
Well, if you consider Army Navy, but that's its own kind of weird deal too.
Yeah,
it's really Georgia, Florida, OU, and Texas. I'm not sure who else would be, in the ballpark of this. I would say that to me too. I liked it when Georgia and the Gators had blue and red on in 2014 and 2015. It really made the colors pop. They went away from that. I'm not totally sure why they went away from it, but UCLA and USC do that.
It looks really good.
It looks great.
UCLA, USC.
You couldn't really do that with Oklahoma and Texas, but Georgia and Carolina did that in 2016, and the colors just look so good on TV. The NCAA stipulates, I'm pretty sure they still stipulate that one team must be in white, which I get, but in colors so obviously different like red and blue, it is interesting to see both schools in their primary colors. Well, Dylan, what do you make of of this game? Georgia's going to be about a little bit either over or under a touchdown favorite to win this game. What do you make of the outcome of this game?
Well, I think Georgia wins. I don't know if they cover that. I think it will be really close, personally. But I would still pick Georgia to win. I think this is probably the best team they'll play this season, but I don't know if it'll be the toughest game. I still think Auburn's going to be a bit tougher just because of the environment. But this will certainly be the best regular season team they play.
So you think the Gators are better than Notre Dame?
Yeah, I would say so.
I think that
Michigan kind of shows that IMO.
Yeah, I think they're both in the same ballpark. It's gonna. I mean, I think Georgia has a lot to prove on Saturday, and you could feel that from Jake Fromm when he was talking Wednesday night about this game and its importance. I think Georgia will pull away. I don't know if it's going to be close or not. Like what I mean to say is, I don't know if they're going to cover or not. But I do think they will win a fourth quarter game, it seems like to me, which is what they did last year. The Gators have played a lot of fourth quarter games, man. Miami, Kentucky, South Carolina, LSU, Auburn. Those were all fourth quarter games for Florida. I don't think that the Gators are going to be, overwhelmingly bothered by playing a fourth quarter game. I don't know if Georgia really would be either. But you look at that was a 17-13 game with them in Auburn going in until I can't remember when Florida scored in the fourth quarter, but they did. So both these teams have played quite a bit of tight games, and I expect it to be tight too. But I do think, man, I think that with the way Georgia plays and what they want to do, there's not a lot of programs that match up real well with them defensively. South Carolina did a really good job, and Georgia had 4 turnovers. Georgia had 4 turnovers. If they have 4 turnovers, they'll lose in this game. If they don't have 4, I mean, you don't want 3, but I think they'll win. So we'll just see. All right, join us on the website. Go ahead and click to subscribe, and we will see you over the website, dawgpost.com, dawgpost.com. Let us know what you think about what we said. Tell us if the Dogs win or lose. Thanks for listening.